$118 million box office opening weekend for the Guardians. Was it the smash hit, exciting revival of beloved characters that we all hoped for? Or was it another in the long line of MCU mids? Welcome to issue number 6 of Last Page. I am Maverick King, joined by Remington King, Jason Cedars, joining us via the powers of the internet. And this was a movie that we were all very excited for. Remy had it, I believe you're number 2.
Yeah.
And get up closer to the mic, please.
Yes.
Yeah, your number 2 movie you were most anticipated for, could not miss, was going to be a great movie. Jason's very excited. I was very excited. But did it deliver on its promise of the swan song from James Gunn that we all hoped it would be?
Absolutely fucking not.
Oh, no.
You can't cuss within the first minute. All right, I'll bleep that. No, just keep going. I'll bleep it. I'll have to bleep that. The first bleep we've ever done.
A reference from
I know, Wolf of Wall Street.
That's another reoccurring theme on our episodes now is Wolf of Wall Street references.
It's definitely the best of all of our reoccurring themes, which we shouldn't name even what the reoccurring themes are this early into the podcast. We'll save that for later.
Remy, I did not realize that was your response to the movie. Holy shit.
Jen, I am more I felt more disappointment leaving that movie than anything else. Expectations were high. And it wasn't even just expectations were high because I thought it was like, I mostly just went into the movie with the feeling like, for sure, this is going to be good. Like, I thought James Gunn had really nailed down the characters and coming out of Guardians 1 and 2, I was just like supremely confident that I was going to like the product that he was going to put forth. And I mostly just came away from the movie generally feeling like it had some good parts. It definitely was funny at some parts. There were some good aspects to it, but it could have been so much better. That's my initial reaction.
My initial reaction was definitely excitement, enjoyment, appreciation. I think the first thing I told my wife when I got out of the movie was bittersweet. You know, I really enjoyed a lot of the endings and how they tied it up. But another one of my initial first reactions is this was James Gunn's ending that he wanted, not the ending that we wanted. You know, we're comic book fans, we're fans of these, characters in this. And did we want to see them kind of all go their separate ways and have a little perfect little bow tied on all these characters? Probably not. You know, we wanted to see some things still like lingering storylines and things like that. But everything I think got tied up very well, and for better or for worse. But I really did enjoy the movie. I loved the soundtrack. I loved the visuals, where they went, and how it ended, and even the villain and how that all portrayed. So I'm going to be the voice of positivity this time on this episode. I'm not going to have to put this mantle on to our guest speakers this time. but yeah, initial reaction, enjoyed it immensely.
The word that perfectly sums up this movie was safe. And this movie was built as being the Guardian swan song, the movie that was going to say goodbye to all of these characters. And James Gunn now taking over for DC, we're probably not going to see a creative like him with his greatness and faults. We're not going to see someone like him in the MCU and bring his kind of vision back to these Marvel movies. So this movie was built as being this big, basically an endgame type of movie for the Guardians. And it ended up just being an adventure. This felt more like a number 2 movie than number 2 did. Number 2 had bigger ramifications and much better arcs for the individual characters than this movie did. And when the movie was over, it was like, I don't feel satisfied on any level. Like, there's no bittersweet because these characters just kind of go their separate ways, but nobody really changed from where they started. Gamora was still an asshole. She just finds her way with the Ravagers. Peter just goes his separate way, and just kind of everyone just kind of like breaks, like almost like a school break. Like at the end of school season, everyone's like, "Oh, well, I'll see you next summer." That's kind of how it felt, and it just felt like, I don't know if it was James Gunn because he's the only accredited writer, so I'm going to give him all the credit and the blame. But unless Disney came in and said, "No, you can't kill anybody. You can't destroy any of these properties because we're going to want them for future." Unless it was that, and he just had his hands tied and was like, "Well, I can't kill anyone because they won't let me." But generally, there should have been much more dire consequences for these characters, and it just felt like this was not, this wasn't satisfying on many levels, or on most levels.
Yeah, no. I didn't realize both of you guys were on the dislike train on this guy. I wasn't quite prepared. I thought we were all just going to talk about how cool this movie was. But no, I definitely can see where you're coming from, though. It had high expectations. This movie, it was, and it set up the swan song, this end game kind of level, but it was so much smaller scale. It wasn't them saving the galaxy this time. It was so much of Rocket's backstory was just the main like fixture of this, and even the action scenes I felt like were added to Rocket's story, But I was okay with that. I felt like every other character we had fleshed out over 2 movies, 2 Avengers movies, a Thor movie, and a holiday special. So, like through all of those, like 4 other things, we saw a lot of Nebula's growth, Gamora's growth, Quill's growth, Drax's growth, but not so much on Rocket. He was just this asshole, in a lot of these things that we don't know why or anything. So it was, if you weren't a fan of that whole Rocket backstory and watching animal torture for like 2 hours too, it was like, there were some hard parts of that. Like, I was like, damn, dude, is this what the movie's all going to be about? These horror movie, grotesque animal walrus, on wheels and bunnies on spider legs, like I said, I don't know if I'm going to get that bunny image out of my head for a while. That was pretty grotesque, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that you had to be kind of all in for that Rocket backstory to really feel like this was going to do anything for you as a movie.
Yeah, I thought Rocket's backstory was mostly well done. I think for him, I think, yeah, it was like, so he mentions, he has a little bit of an emotional breakdown in Guardians 2.
Guardians 1.
Was it Guardians 1?
When he's crying at the bar.
When he's crying about talking about being ripped
Oh,
apart
yeah,
and put back together
Drax,
or whatnot. And he's like, you don't know what it feels like, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's Guardians 1. And he has another emotional moment with Yondu in Guardians 2. So we already kind of had the idea of what was going on. It wasn't like this complete mystery. And then pretty early on in the movie, you're just like, oh, okay, like genetic experimentation. So you kind of get the idea, and then you just go. So then it's drawn out over a very long, what felt like a very unnecessarily long movie. And I thought that was good. It was like, it doesn't actually add anything to his character. That was my thing, is I thought we spent a lot of time, and it's just like, yeah, it's fucked up. Like, we kind of already knew that your background was fucked up. And there's just like more, it's just like, now I'm just seeing it. So I'm just like, it anchors it maybe a little bit better than just hearing about it. But I didn't feel like it was, I guess my big feeling with his backstory and the overall, and one of my like 4 or 5 problems with this movie is that it wasn't really an arc. And I think James Gunn and I didn't really consider this going into the movie, he had already peaked with all the arcs, with all the characters already. Because Guardians 2, within that one movie, almost every single character has their own journey and arc. And so I guess I just didn't really consider the fact that that James Gunn didn't have anything left to do with the characters other than make them yell at each other. And that's one of the bigger things where I felt like everybody at the beginning of the movie is basically the same at the end of the movie, especially considering that none of them die or sacrifice themselves. And I felt like that same, even though it's a Rocket movie, basically, I felt like that's the same kind of feeling of just like Rocket's not any different. He is the same guy at the end of the movie as he is before he gets shot in the chest, and we see the flashbacks. We just know how bad the backstory is now, I guess.
But it's also so much of the character arcs. I feel like they became the person that they needed the most when they were like younger. It's like Rocket becomes this kind of leader of the new the Guardians, because he wasn't there for his family. Peter kind of now goes back to his family because that's what he wanted when he was younger. It's like, it was like these, like you said, they were kind of complete. But that came through my head so much with, I think, more Nebula and Rocket, as far as like they became these people that they wanted or needed when they were younger at the beginning of their life. It was this almost like, self-fulfilling prophecy of, if you came from a broken home, you're like going to make sure that the home that you're raising was something that you'd want to be in when you were younger. So yeah, it had these like so much more smaller moments that were cool within it, and it's like the big one I kind of wanted to save for later when we talk about Groot, but it was like just finally understanding him. I think that like had such a huge weight to the movie. It was such a small thing, like us hearing Groot say, I love you guys. I think it was this whole like overarching trend through all of the Guardians movies, and anyone who knows Groot, is you finally start to understand what Groot is saying after you've been around him long enough, or like been part of like the Guardians family. And it showed how Nebula started to understand what Groot was saying, I think towards in Guardians 2, or maybe it was just the beginning of 3, or maybe Holiday Special, but it was something that she slowly did. And then Gamora didn't understand Groot anymore, where Gamora used to, the other Gamora did, but this one didn't. And then at the very couple last scenes, Gamora finally understands Groot. And then the very last scene, we as an audience understand what Groot was saying. So it wasn't like Groot was speaking English all of a sudden. We were in on like this. We'd been inducted into the family of the Guardians. It's like, so little things like that. I felt like we're so like clever and clutch about this movie, where it had these little nice bows, these little tie-offs in some of these characters. But I think it was a little more subtle, a little more smaller, not this big picture, big in your face kind of stamp finish on these characters.
Completely disagree. This both sucked. The movie itself is actually fine. Like base level, it's too long. It's 2 hours and 2.5 hours. The movie generally is fine because I was sitting there and you're hanging out with the Guardians. You have Drax and Nebula and everyone that's a part of the Guardians, and they're having their jokes. Some work, some don't. Generally speaking, like I wasn't miserable during this movie. I know I'm complaining about it, but it's just because it's just because of the expectations. Like this movie had been done. I think the first one is one of the best, one of the best movies of the MCU, and the second movie is also great. And the second movie, you just go back, and I think this movie makes the second movie look even better because of, like, for example, Peter's arc. In this movie, they just throw in like, oh yeah, you have that grandpa who might still be alive, and like that's his whole arc of this movie. Is at the end, he's like ends up with a grandpa. They just throw that in this movie. It's not set up at all, but in the first movie, they do set up. At the end of the first movie with him and his dad, and that arc of Peter learning it's not who your blood family is, it's who your actual family is, who the people that love you and you love them. And that was way more powerful and effective than just, here's a picture, Peter, we're going to need you to go see your grandpa at the end. And it's just like, again, just unsatisfied. It's very, very unfortunate. And then the soundtrack. How do we feel about the soundtrack? Because that is the biggest thing, and maybe to a detriment to a lot of movies now, where now the thing to do is just to have a catalog of pop music, where the first two Guardians did it superbly. Did this movie also deliver on its soundtrack promise, Rembo?
No, I thought they went for quantity over quality is basically how I felt about it, where the first, I pulled it up just because I already knew. As soon as I left the movie, I was like, there was way too many songs. That was my first thought. I was like, that was way too many songs played like back to back to back, where it's not even, you're not even getting this moment for one song and then it just goes into the next. Like the opening scene is fine, where Rocket's humming and kind of singing along to Creep, which is a bit of a random, but I guess I got the idea of, messed up animal. But Guardians 1, the playlist track time is 47 minutes. The playlist track time for Volume 2 is 50 minutes. One song longer. The Guardians for 3, it's an hour and 12 minutes. Like almost another 30 minutes of extra songs, 22 extra minutes of songs in there. And I do not look back on the songs. I can't place too many of the scenes in my head of being like, oh, I really like that one scene with that particular song. I can kind of place the songs, but I don't have an association with scenes the same way I do from Guardians 1 and 2, which makes it work so well. The song in Guardians 2, the song when Yondu goes God mode and kills everybody. And
oh yeah.
when that song comes on, it's in a little cafe. I'm blanking on it now, of course, but I have a direct association, like, oh yeah, there's that song in that scene, and it works really well. In this, it felt more just like every scene, every 5 minutes, where we're getting a new scene with a new song, and then it just felt a little bit redundant, which is the same problem, which coincides with all the jokes and the humor of this movie being overdone, and us getting all these scenes where I was like, do we really need that? Did we really need the back and forth of Drax sleeping and putting his feet up on the couch? I was like, that was a joke that I was like, please just stop. And then it kept on doing it. I was like, please make it stop. Like there were things that were funny in this movie, and yeah, generally good movie, fine. It's a fine movie. But it's James Gunn being high on his own supply. Like taking all the things that worked, and people made this argument about Guardians 2 being like, oh, we thought they did too much jokes. Well, if Guardians 2 had too many jokes for you, then this movie definitely does, because they just, with the soundtrack and the jokes, it was constantly going back to the same thing. We couldn't just have a regular story developing. We had to, if there wasn't music playing, there had to be jokes, and if there wasn't jokes, there had to be music playing. That's how I felt during the movie. But yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't hate the existence. I just was sitting there and being like, man, this could have been done better.
I mean, it's definitely his style now. You know, that's James Gunn's style of movies. Because even after I got out of Guardians 3, I think it was that night or maybe the next day, I was like, I need to watch Suicide Squad again to think how is he...
I have never had.
Yeah, no.
I know. I didn't think I was going to watch Suicide Squad again, but I was like, you know what? I do remember him doing the music thing, the comedy thing in that one, very similar. And it has a very similar feel to even this newer Guardians, where it is but in the same breath though, the first scene with Rocket and Creep, Radiohead, and we probably should do a shout out to Zach Glenn and his podcast that I imagine he'll be talking about the old Radiohead. What's the name of his podcast? You guys know? What's it?
Idiotalk.
Available now on Apple Music, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.
There you go. Shout out, Zach. I'm sure he will love the movie just because it started off with the Radiohead song.
I already got a text. I already got a text from him talking about how he was excited when he learned that Creep is in the beginning of the movie.
Okay, great. We got to get his reaction on it too. But I feel like that set the tone, of the movie. That was the intro song, and that was 90s, right? Early 90s, maybe. That Radiohead song. Oh, I'm going to get blasted by Zach by not knowing the exact year of that one, but that was okay, this is what the tone of this movie is going to be like. And then I like how it's not just background music, it's actually Rocket playing it. He's got the device there in his hand. You can see the speakers in their city. What's her little
Nowhere
head called?
Well, it's Nowhere. I don't know.
Nowhere. Yes, city, that little Nowhere head. They have speakers set up all along the city, so they have this soundtrack to their lives. And Rocket even kind of singing it himself as he's walking around, where it sets this very somber tone, where it wasn't going to be this very 70s, 60s fun kind of disco era funky. What's that?
Acid trip of a movie.
Exactly. Yeah. And it wasn't. I mean, I think they did have some Earth, Wind, and Fire, and there was maybe a couple of a little bit older ones.
They had Beastie Boys in there.
Yeah, but see, and that's that more 90s, and it was and I think at the very end he gets the 2000s playlist, and so we get a little bit more like 2000s-ish, but I almost enjoyed that it wasn't this, okay, we're just going to keep doing these bangers from the 60s and 70s, because it has that feel. The 2000s and 90s, very much their acoustic and their rock scene was a little bit more somber, was a little bit more like that feel, and so it almost played to that genre of the time, but yeah, I did feel like they didn't play out the songs as much as they did, and they didn't like have scenes that were so fixated on one track. I think the one where they're jumping across the outside of the facility they're trying to break into, I can't remember what that song was, but I felt like it was impactful. But is that the type of thing that we start to enjoy more after multiple views of the movies? When we have seen, 1 and 2, 20 times each, that's when we start really connecting those scenes with those songs. Is it the first watch at the movie theater when there's so much else going on? Are you really like developing those impactful like moments?
I would
with the
say
songs?
absolutely, because that first song, Redbone, when it's "Come and Get Your Love," like that song. The one I don't think I could ever place that song before Guardians. The moment when Peter comes out with the headphones on in the first movie and playing that is burned into your brain because it's so powerfully effective to introduce a character.
Well, that song is in this movie again too.
Yeah,
that's on the track.
Go back and play what worked
I
from the
can't
first
remember
movie.
which scene it was in. Like I can't remember what the third one was. Like, yeah, you're right. I can. So there's certain ones, and Creep is, I guess, much more in us. But like the Mowgli's, the San Francisco, like I like that song, but I can't place where it was in the movie. And then No Sleep Till Brooklyn. It's funny that that's in the Mario movie, and that's all I think about now is No Sleep Till Brooklyn is in the Mario movie. And I'm like, that's right, that's in Guardians 2, which is so funny. Chris Pratt, both movies, both getting some of the same songs, kind of thing. So I enjoyed it all in all, actually, the soundtrack. And when I was getting ready for this podcast, I had it on the background when we were driving around yesterday on my day off. We were listening to the Guardians 3 playlist. So it's just going to take a while, I think, for all of us to really like place those scenes with the songs.
Yeah, you are correct that after you watch the movie a couple of times, some of the parts will probably ring more true. It does feel like there's too many songs, generally speaking. And what feels like James Gunn being left to his own devices as the sole writer and the director of the movie, and not having other people to kind of keep him balanced, I think really shows itself in the hallway scene, in the corridor scene, when it's a one shot and it's all the Guardians fighting. And I forget what song is playing at that moment, if it was Beastie Boys or whoever it was. But there's that song playing. And last night, I found the clip on the internet of that corridor scene. And I played the Guardians theme over it, and it is a billion times better. If you find that scene and you play the Guardians theme instead of whatever song that is, it gives you the Guardians feels, because you're seeing all the Guardians doing their moves, and it feels like they're a team. And they've been separated the whole movie. They've finally back, and they're attacking the enemy together. That Guardians theme, it's so powerful there, where really the Guardians theme is absent in almost the entire movie. And the only time I recall even hearing it was we don't hear it the whole movie, which is typically an effective maneuver that was done in Casino Royale. They don't use the James Bond theme at all. At all. The whole movie, they don't use his theme until the very last scene. He shoots Mr. White. He's on the ground, and then James Bond starts walking over him, and then you hear the bump, bump, and he says, "My name's Bond, James Bond." Boom, the theme kicks in, and it's one of the most memorable parts of that whole franchise. Cut back to Guardians, you're just playing a pop song, and you don't use the theme for the whole movie until you see Rocket's ship. And at that point, I was like, wait, who's in that ship? Because everyone's still separated, and it's Rocket, okay. But it was like a waste, and I just feel like that could have been done so much better, but I think James Gunn just had free reign to be like, no, I like my songs. And that was what we got.
Good point.
Yeah, I think the Russos were way better about the timing of when to use themes. Because in Infinity War, the first time it's used is when Captain America shows up to save Vision and Scarlet Witch from.
When he walks out of the dark.
Yeah, when he walks out of the dark, that's when the dun, 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 it's in the train, well done. It's such a sick fucking scene. And
Or he catches the spear first, right?
they throw it and he catches it, and then it's beautifully done. I think so that's where I think we all really appreciated the creativity of the soundtracks of James Gunn's directing style, and that and I will say definitely other directors and movies have definitely copied it, or attempted to copy it. But I just feel like it was one of those things where too much of a good thing. Too much of a good thing for I mean, so those are my final thoughts on I just agree on the theme. I think the theme should be important. It's the Guardians have a great theme. I don't see why it wasn't utilized better. But those are my final thoughts on the soundtrack anyway.
I want to touch base really quick on the comedy stuff that you were talking about, where it is, James Gunn and his comedy style, and how they constantly have to switch whoever the comedic relief is, I feel like, in these movies. And I think they burned us out on Drax in the last movie. Like, we were like, when him laughing at his own jokes constantly and just him just being this buffoon, I think they had to switch it. And I think this will be another point of disagreement between us three, but old Will Puller pulling off the
God, I literally put that out of my brain when you said that.
I knew it. Well, he was definitely the comic relief. That's what they were leaning on towards, and for better or for worse, because they took that mantle
for better. For better. Hey, so don't even say that. What's the for better?
So,
one of the most powerful characters that they introduce as a joke, as a man-child, as an incompetent buffoon. So what is for better about that? Tell me, Jason. What?
It's to fill that role. I mean, I couldn't agree. Like the role of the comedic.
There's already 10 people filling that role. We didn't need another one.
No, they didn't want those people to have those roles anymore. They're like, okay, the ending for them. We want to do it on someone else. So, hey, I couldn't agree with you more. Adam Warlock is such a badass character in the comics, and they did him so wrong. But as far as the comedic relief role in this movie, I feel like he did a good job, but not as a good job as what Adam Warlock should be moving forward. So, do they kill this one off? Do we get another version of Adam Warlock that's we get a multiverse one where he is perfect and he's not some man-child and they addressed that. Remember, he got pulled out of his egg too quickly. This was the High Evolutionaries wanting to make because this was his creations making creation, and and that was what also did this kind of warped baby thing. So they address that, and they kind of do it. But I knew that you guys are gonna be shirt ripping off moment of no. Polar. Now you guys had such high hopes for that character too, and I know a lot of people did. So it did not meet the expectations that we went in thinking this character was going to be. But I think of what he was is fine.
It's not Will Poller's fault. That's the role they wrote, or that's the role that was written for him. So I think he could have been a fine Adam Warlock, not as good as Zac Efron would have been. But it's just, again, why just use him as a cheap joke when he could be a cool character? But it just again, it's an MCU thing where they are afraid of introducing cool characters. I mean, even as a side character, like in Black Panther, M'Baku is dope in the first Black Panther, and he's in the movie just in brief parts, but when he shows up, it's like, this dude's awesome, and he's funny, and he's very competent. This is a dope character, and you want to see more of him. This movie does not make you want to see any more of Adam Warlock. It's not like I can't wait to see Adam Warlock go through his pubescent stage. It's really just a waste.
Yeah, that is the worst part of the whole movie is the to steal a term from you, the abortion of Adam Warlock. Actually, kind of literally, because they pull him out early. So he's actually a half abortion, half preemie.
Planned Parenthood wanted his fetal remains so badly.
I'm starting the narrative that the High Evolutionary actually needed stem cells from Adam Warlock. He had cancer and he needed stem cell therapy, so he pulled him out early to take part of the stem cells from his. Anyway,
yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunate. Adam Warlock, really, dude. This guy could be, if they had actually put some effort into it, he could have been what they wanted Brie Larson to be. Your intergalactic movie leading character that's super fucking badass and stoic and not boring, but just has a presence about him that like when he's around, you're kind of on edge. That's at least how I feel when I'm reading Adam Warlock's in the comics, especially in the Infinity Saga. Like, so that's going into Infinity War the first time. A big part of my curiosity was like, okay, are we like, is Adam Warlock going to make an appearance? I had that like in the back of my head because they tease him at the end of Guardians 2. And they actually tease him at the end of Thor 2, too. They have Adam Warlock's actual cocoon in the collector's box.
Oh,
they have his actual
cocoon
cocoon in there, and then we just never mention it again. And then they just retcon that to bring him into Guardians 2 post-credit scene. And it's like, okay. And then so I'm like, okay, important character. Like, he's the number 2. He's literally the second most important character in the comics in the Infinity Saga next to Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be like, okay, he's not going to be in it at all. It's like, okay, we're going to bring him in the Guardians movie. I'm like, okay, this could still be good. And then to just bring him in as a complete joke side character, nothing even remotely akin to how he is in the comics, or it just, why? Like, you could just take him out of this movie entirely and it wouldn't have mattered at all. He's a completely irrelevant character to the story. It was such a disappointment. And again, yeah, like you said, not his fault, not Will Poulter's fault at all. I think he's a very competent actor. I think he could have done a really good job if he was given the opportunity, but Disney / James Gunn / both of them clearly had no interest in building a character that we could actually care to see in movies going forward. It sucks. That was the worst part of the movie for sure, was the burning of Adam Warlock.
Yeah, there's so we should touch on the High Evolutionary.
Oh, yes.
Let's go through some of these characters. Yeah, some of the other ones.
The High Evolutionary introduced into this movie, and he's basically an evil Noah, where he wants to smite everyone. I guess that might just be Noah and God combined into one character. So
what is Rocket says it perfectly. He just hates everything that's not perfect, or something along those lines.
He I don't know, something about some body positive message. Anyway, but yeah, no. So yeah, it basically is just he's wants to create these new worlds in his own image, and these furry type of characters, one could say, that belong that are put on a planet. I just was watching that scene of all these animals in suits, and I'm just like, there's going to be conventions that are themed after this movie.
Oh God!
So, I thought the actor
New Men.
What?
New Men, I think, is what that race is called. Like,
you mean Sid's Toy Farm?
Yeah.
But yeah, the actor seems great, but at a certain point, he went from being interesting and kind of like you wondered how bad he was, like how deep. He tortured animals and tortured Rocket, but to what level of planet? Like he ends up destroying an entire planet. But then he just turns into a rage monster where he just yells at everyone, kind of like every other character does in this movie. And it kind of lost the mystique of, ooh, this guy is interesting. And then he just gets got in a 3-punch combo, and it's just, he's gone. Okay. But anyway, Jason, your thoughts on the High Evolutionary?
Yeah, he had promising beginnings, how it started off and everything, very intrigued, and not too familiar with his comic book origins, because I know it has a lot to do with Quicksilver and Wanda and the mountain that they are from. Mount starts with a W or something like that, but it's they touch on it in Doctor Strange and something else. But anyways, not knowing a lot about his past or his origin. And so I was kind of intrigued by this guy and kind of liked how this was going. And yeah, I don't think it finished very well. And you didn't really get a good explanation of his powers, because he did have these psychic something like powers. He was shooting people away, but then Rocket destroys his face somehow. Because what we see at the end of the movie was, I guess, what Rocket did to him when he was like a kid, like ripped off his cheeks and lips and stuff like that. So it can't be that powerful. And how you're creating all of these new men, but you can't fix your own grill and your own face. You're just going to slap on some plastic over top of it. So, I mean, it looked cool. I like the whole kind of stretched face look. And I feel like the actor, did a fine job. I was getting kind of like some sort of Ant-Man bad guys vibes from him as far as actor, kind of almost leading it, and then just kind of sputtered out towards the end. So was that something where a 2.5 hour movie, they were making cuts and they had more scenes with him and maybe a little bit more fleshed out his character, and they were like, okay, we don't need this throwaway villain so detailed? But once again, is this another throwaway villain that we're not going to see again after this? But we did not see a body. I think he just blew up with the ship, right? Is that how we saw his death? He kind of went down with the ship. And then
Generally speaking, if you don't see him die, then he's not dead. Again, just put on the shelf. Maybe Disney pulls him back for a Disney Plus show at some point.
And his abilities and what he's doing, I mean, you could put him as a bad guy for very many characters in very different situations. So I did a fine job. It was nothing bad, nothing great. But yeah, I was overall impressed with him. And just, yeah. The animal torture, though, as I could see a little less of that. But yeah, no, some of the other characters, your thoughts, Remy?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty weak. All in all, I think we all felt the same way. Started out promising, interesting. You kind of like the whole god complex. I like, as I say, you can do a good villain with a god complex. There's different routes to take with villains. Like, are they psychotic? Are they, are you going more of the serial killer vibe? Or are you going the god complex vibe? You get, different ranges. And so obviously he's on the god complex range. And I like the basic idea of being where his character was coming from. But then he just boils down into the angry rage monster screaming at everybody. Power's not fleshed out at all. The only comment about his powers explanation is they very briefly in one sentence mentions I have the power or have control of gravity. So that was the whole idea, is that he has power of gravity, which somehow that means he can vaporize people when he wants to, but not when he's being attacked. Like, that was the thing. He vaporizes all of his subordinates when they're like turning on him, but then the Guardians attack him, and because Rocket has anti-gravity boots, somehow that means that he's powerless.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So it was just, the wrap up for his finale was so lame. I was just like, really, just like, just literally, just 1-2 done. Everybody gets a shot on him, and it's just like, I'm helpless. Very, very unfortunate that they didn't flesh him out very well, or at least give him enough scenes to where you really felt the level of his power. So I don't know. I think I could see definitely he could reappear in some Disney Plus show.
I would like to see him versus the Collector Disney Plus show, where he's trying to destroy all like the freaks and everything, and the Collector is like slowly gathering all the freaks, and it turns into like, just like a yin yang kind of battle.
That's funny.
And the Collector's still alive, right?
No, I think he's pretty much confirmed dead from Thanos.
Because Thanos wiped.
Because Thanos was him, right?
Yeah, he
was the Collector.
Yeah. So quick final thoughts. I'll just say what I will say, positively speaking, I love the cast. I mean, I feel like everyone did as good as possible. There was no one that I was like, that person sucks. Everyone in the Guardians is awesome. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. I love Chris Pratt. Thought him as Star-Lord has always been great. In Infinity War, he's great. In all the movies, I love seeing Chris Pratt and things. I think he's a good dude. He's just fun. I'm like, I want to hang out with that guy. Watch a Chris Pratt movie and tell me you don't want to hang out with that guy. That guy just seems awesome. Bradley Cooper's Rocket / Sean Gunn. Mantis. I don't know how to say Palm's last name, but I love Mantis as a character. She did get more shine. I don't like that she was yelling as like all that in this movie because she's an empath, and maybe she's just feeding off of everyone's energy. But I love her as a character and as an actress. Drax. I love to see Dave Bautista move on and start doing serious stuff, because that's really what he wants to do with it, which I think is very admirable. And he doesn't want to be The Rock. He wants to be like an own serious actor. So I wish him the best of luck. Karen Gillan as Nebula, I think, is the most surprising. Like, used to be kind of not a dumb character, but just did very irrelevant in the first Guardians movie, and gets this great arc that goes through Endgame. And I think she was fantastic. And Vin Diesel is Groot. Great job, Vin. And obviously, Gamora is one of my favorite characters. And I don't care for post-death Gamora too much, but I love all the characters, and I wish all the actors the best.
Yeah, I definitely do. I do feel like I'm not. Yeah, I didn't. That's a good point to be positive here. I definitely don't think any of the characters. My only problem was Nebula just yelling too much. It felt like she was. Yeah, we got a lot of scenes of her yelling at people, and I felt like we had got we should have been past that. I was like, we've already gotten through all these big arcs with the Guardians up to this point. It feels like it should be a little bit more like we all just love each other and get along for the most part. But she just so. Other than that, I feel like everybody did really well. I thought, I was gonna say, I enjoy each of the characters individually, and as a group, I do like hanging out with the Guardians. That is a good time. Biggest miss for this movie is just that they didn't kill anybody. Somebody needed to die to actually anchor this movie down and give me real tears. I needed the emotional cleanse that I expected going into this movie, and I didn't get it. So that sucks. I probably won't watch it ever again. But I'm just going to go back and rewatch Guardians 2 for the 15th time because I love that movie so much.
Jason didn't believe you for 1 second when you said you weren't going to watch it again.
No, yeah. I think you're going to see it on the background because I remember Guardians 2 not sitting well with me the first couple times. Then it was like multiple watches. I'm like, oh, this is one of my favorite movies. So I think it's going to be one of those for us again too. But
could be.
But no, teach their own. But yeah, no, a quick one for me as far as some of the characters go. I agree with you guys a lot on a lot of them. I really thought Drax was going to be the one that got killed off. Actually, I could see him as a character, like him trying to pull our emotional strings with him, dying. But his arc was so complete. I feel like already after Thanos died, because Thanos killed his wife and child. He got revenge on Thanos. Done. But I think now they were like, well, let's at least give him a family or something like that, something to go off with. So he got all these, orphaned kids, he gets to take care of on nowhere. So I felt like, yeah, it was a not the easier ending for him, the one that we wanted to see. It's like I originally thought with this is like, this is what James Gunn wanted for a lot of these characters endings, not as much what we wanted, and probably some execs at Disney Plus being like, you can't kill them off. We want to use them later, maybe in 10 years, they're going to want this contract back again. So yeah, Drax was one of the more disappointing ones. Mantis, I'm really surprised you guys like her. Like, I do not like her.
Really?
And I think that is, I think you love or hate Mantis, her style of acting and the character she is. It's like, I thought that was just a underutilized kind of character that she was. There's almost like, pincushion or beating, the angle that everyone else could make fun of themselves through or do jokes off of and things like that she never really got this big character development or arc, and it is kind of nice that she is going to go off and do her own thing and not just try to be with everyone else, going from being Ego's kind of subordinate and then going to just being a member of the Guardians, and now she gets to run off and do her own thing. So I think that was a little better ending for the character than I expected. But yeah, Mantis not high on the Guardians tier in my book.
I love Mantis. I mean, to me,
That's funny.
It's just great that there's like her character being the sensitive one and just she's very feminine, but also like badass and has moments of badassery, but she's the most feminine character in probably the entire MCU. And I feel like she really balances it well with being capable, but like obviously coming from a fucked up past, but then evolving as the movies go on. And yeah, like do all the jokes work with Mantis work? No, but I think I love her character, and I love her character juxtaposed to Drax and the other Guardians, which is my only thing is I wish that Drax and her ended up together.
That would be a very nice story. I would have liked that.
Right.
MCU Marvel is scared of relationships, unfortunately, so they're afraid to do anything like that.
What did it say? You are disgusting on the outside, or something like that.
You are hideous.
Yeah, hideous. Just on the outside. Yeah, I'm glad you put it inside. Nebula, yeah, I feel like Nebula mirrored Rocket's kind of story, of her like being so abused, so worked on, things like that, and then kind of developing into their own characters. So it was kind of cool to see two characters kind of go through the same, very similar origins and storylines, but kind of end up differently in how they approached and attacked it. So yeah, I think Rocket and Nebula were like some of the best stories and actors, throughout that. And I'm such a big person on, I can catch or hear the actor's voice as the character, and Bradley Cooper, I could not hear Bradley Cooper, it really felt like Rocket, it didn't, pull me out as much as when you hear, I just saw Super Mario. So I hear Jack Black as Bowser every single time, Bowser talks, and that's good. But, I just always picture that actor. So I love that I didn't picture Bradley Cooper the entire time Rocket was talking. So yeah, I feel like those two were kind of the bigger ones. And already touched on Groot. I really liked how the whole getting to understand him, and then how powerful he was actually getting there towards the end. How Groot was like, I forgot that because we hadn't seen full Groot since the like first half of the first movie. Or I guess he blows himself up towards the end. When they hit when the ship crashes on the name. What's that one city? But whatever, you guys know. But yeah, it was cool to see Groot in full like power form, and even at the very post credit scene, he's just that rock or something is something massive that you don't even see him in the background, and then and then he just gets up and he is this towering figure, even bigger than the original Groot was. So yeah, to see his transformation just physically, I thought was cool.
Well, no post credit scene needed because we are out of time, and that is last page.